This is the Orlando Sentinel's editorial board interview in Senate District 15. It is a highly unusual race in that this is the Democratic primary, but because only 2 Democrats are running, everybody gets to vote who lives inside District 15. Republicans and Democrats. And the contenders are both state representatives, Kamia Brown and Geraldine Thompson, who have been representing Orange County, parts of Orange County for quite some time. And we're going to spend about 30 minutes talking to them about the issues, and we look forward to hearing what they have to say. And I'm going to dive right in with the first question. If you are elected, it is quite likely that you will be in the minority party, and this is something you've had a good bit of experience with, but in the House, but when you're in the Senate, what will you do to make sure that the residents of District 15 have their voices heard? And we'll start with Representative Brown.
Thank you for this opportunity to be here. Just through my time in the legislature, I've spent time through the serving as an intern, then as for a number of years as a legislative aide, and worked my way up to be a House member. And through that time, I've learned how the importance of working in a bipartisan fashion, right? And so, during my 6 years, I think my effective service has been contributed by the willingness to work with others, but also those that are within the majority party in order to get things done. At the end of the day, I go to Tallahassee to definitely advocate for my community, but more importantly, they are looking for me to bring resources home. And so, we've learned how to do that. When you're looking at, expanding Medicaid for postpartum women, when you're looking at creating scholarships for Ocoee residents, when you look at a lot of the things that I've been able to accomplish, championing for healthcare or restructuring the Office of Minority Health, those things were done by being able to work across the aisle and maneuver, and not just with things in the House. I've also been able to do it in the Senate, my race has been endorsed by many of the Democratic senators who knows that I'm capable of working well within this particular legislature, and then also getting things done.
Representative Thompson.
Thank you very much, and I am glad to be here with you. One of the things that I've worked on is getting a member of the majority party to be a co-sponsor on bills that I would like to get through the process. And that has been very effective. I did that in the case of James Joseph Richardson, who was wrongfully incarcerated in Florida for over 22 years. Many of those years he spent on death row. I worked with Senator Tom Lee, and we were able to get Mr. Richardson $1.2 million under a formula that Florida has set 50 years for every year that you are wrongfully incarcerated. And his next door neighbor, in failing health, she confessed that she had poisoned his 7 children. He was in prison for allegedly poisoning those children. So getting a co-sponsor and working with people across the aisle is something that I do. In the last legislative session, I worked with Representative Randy Fine, got an amendment onto his bill that was moving through the process that focused on the history of the Holocaust. And it was my amendment that got the history of the Ocoee massacre into the curriculum in the state of Florida. So in order to make sure that the citizens and the constituents are served, I would work with members of the majority party, as I have done very effectively in the past.
Thank you very much. I'm going to pop right in on a question that's very related to that. When you work with Republicans, that might make Republicans happy. It can make some of your Democratic base less happy. I wanted to ask you each about a bill that I'd singled out where you each, two different bills, sort of cross party lines to support and get your thinking on this. Representative Thompson, last year's big tax bill, Senate Bill 50. I believe you cross party lines to side with the Republicans on that, and it reduced some business taxes on things like rent. Can you offer some insight into what you were thinking there?
Well, Florida is one of the few states that taxes commercial rental property. And so you have business owners who are paying rent in addition to sales tax and other taxes on rental property. And so I voted because I think we need to reduce and eventually eliminate the taxes on commercial properties. I've been working with members of the real estate industry on that for a number of years. And so this is consistent in terms of what I have done. And yes, it was a Republican initiative, but I think it's good for all of us because it is those businesses, those commercial businesses that hire the people that I serve and that I work for. Okay, thank you. And Representative Brown, one of the bills that we've written a good deal about, and I think we mentioned your vote on this, was the net metering bill this past year. I think you were one of a handful of Democrats to side with the Republicans on that, which would ultimately reduce payments to solar customers. Can you give us some insight on your thinking there?
Yeah, and so my main line of thinking dealt with the cost shift. We have seen where majority of when you're talking about for repairs and all of those things, a lot of that cost goes to those that are low income or those who are renters. And just looking at sort of the climate and just with inflation of a lot of those things, you know, I don't feel that the burden, I feel that the burden should be equitable. Also, when you look at, because I've spent, you know, time with many of the national organizations, but just looking at, you know, sort of the study that came out of California with this particular issue, where California saw, you know, have data that shows that it disproportionately affected folks. Senator Bradford is you know, one who I serve on with many of our national organizations, legislative organizations. And so just was speaking with him about, you know, what was going on here. That was sort of my line of thinking of making sure that that cost shift was not to burden, you know, folks that don't need that additional cost.
Okay, thank you very much.
Wanted to jump in with a quick question for both of you. This is a little bit of a unique setting for us, just because we're speaking to two sitting legislators, as opposed to one being the incumbent. But I wanted to ask you both, from your time in the House, is there, can you pinpoint one or two, if you want, votes that you have made during your time in the House that you regret? And let's start with Representative Brown.
I cannot recall as of now, not to say that I don't regret any, but there are many of the votes that I would say definitely were tough. When you look at, for instance, the property insurance bill, you know, we went to special session hoping to bring lower rates to many of our constituents, but instead there were other you know, things that were in the bill that benefited others versus not seeing an immediate relief, right? And, you know, specifically even just with the amount of money with hardening homes, there are a lot of things, you know, I felt that we should have made a larger investment in that. When you look at, you know, certain bills such as the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas bill, that one in particular, I voted no specifically for, you know, the Guardian plan that would put guns in the hands of teachers. That bill was a very difficult bill because, you know, we understand the crisis that we were dealing with making sure we protect our children and make sure they're safe. But also, I feel it was important for us to expand that conversation with folks who deal with, or communities that deal with gun violence day to day, going back and forth to school on their way to school. And so, you know, there are many bills I wish we could have done more with, but unfortunately, we did not do that. But I really can't think of anything in particular that I can think of specifically that speaks right directly to your question.
Thank you. I do appreciate your insight. Representative Thompson, same question to you.
Well, one of the things that I do is to read the bills. I do a lot of homework. I do a lot of research. And before I cast a vote, I am very familiar with the bills. So I don't remember a bill that I voted on that I now think I should have voted differently. And I think that that is contributable to the fact that I am very versed in the bill before I take a vote on it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And both of you have enough experience to know how unusual the last 2 years have been with the state riding on a torrent of federal money that came down and has made many of your budget decisions a lot easier. Starting the next cycle, that money is going to start drying up, and there are predictions that the economy is at the same time going to be declining. What should the state be doing to get ready for that? And when you start budgeting, how do you plan to set the priorities that do get funded versus the ones that may have to be left behind? And we'll start with Representative Thompson.
Thank you very much. Florida is a hospitality state. We have the largest hospitality industry here in the state of Florida. And I think we need to be investing further in hospitality, and particularly requiring that Visit Florida, Visit Orlando, those kind of destination management organizations market Florida as a place that's safe with regard to following CDC guidelines, that we look at some of the countries that are close to us so that we have some cross-border visitorship. We have some from Latin America now, but I think we need to refocus with regard to our hospitality industry. And I think we need to be looking at what some people call the Green New Deal. And that means that we need to be looking at solar. We need to be looking at biomass. We need to be looking at ways that we can diversify our economy and generate additional revenue that would go into our coffers, in as much as we know and we anticipate that we're going to be losing a lot of the federal dollars.
Thank you. Representative Brown?
Well, you know, I know over the past several years, you know, many Democrats, you know, saw what we're about to be dealing with, which is, you know, a possible recession. And, you know, it was important that we look to invest, you know, our money wisely. You know, now, right now we are in currently a surplus. And I know many folks on the other side sort of, you know, taunt that. But I think it's important that, you know, our focus when we go back to Tallahassee is to really, you know, cut back on some things and be, you know, fiscally responsible. You know, there were a lot of money that went into certain projects, but I think we have to go with those necessities. For instance, that investment in our tourism industry. Representative Thompson just kind of mentioned that. That has been our bread and butter for years, is making sure all are coming in. Right now, I believe we may be at about, you know, 50 cents. I'm sorry, not 50 cents, but 50%, you know, of where we've been in years past. And it's important that we bring those dollars, those people in, so that we are able to make the money that we need to cover the necessities within our budget. Education, we can't go, you know, away from making sure that investment is critical. to make sure our kids have a brighter future and they're able to matriculate to other things. And also our teachers. Right now, I think those critical things should not be something that has to suffer through what it is we're dealing with right now. And so I think investment in our tourism industry and within our schools and education has to be critical in order for us to kind of make it through what we're about to deal with.
Right. Well, I have one quick follow-up, and then I know my friend Scott Maxwell has a follow-up as well. Okay. My question is, and I know, again, once again, you are probably both acutely aware of this. Orange County may be the biggest donor county in the state of Florida, sending far more money to Tallahassee in the form of sales tax revenue than it gets back. And many other counties, as you know, receive more back than they send. What do you think needs to be done to get Orange County a fairer share of that revenue? And how would you accomplish that? Representative Brown?
Well, I think we have to kind of look at sort of the formula and what that allocation looks like. You're right. We send more dollars, and mainly those are, dollars from, us having visitors here within our city. And so I think it's important that we look at to see how we can change instead of dividing it amongst the counties equally. We got to look at from the percentage of, based off of need of that area, but also the investment. And, when you sort of change those formulas and look at, what's being put in, but based off of the need and the population, I feel Orange County could benefit, greater than what we have in the past.
And I think, thank you. I think that having membership on some critical committees will impact getting those dollars back into the Treasury here in Orange County. Certainly having members on appropriations is going to be very important. And a lot of that has to do with the number of individuals from a particular county who are in the legislature. You have quite a number of members from Miami-Dade County, Broward County, etc., who are on these critical committees. So I think it's maneuvering and making sure that you have a good working relationship with Senator Pasadomo. I work with her in the House, have talked with her. She's the incoming president of the Florida Senate about how to make sure that Orange County is represented on some of the critical committees, in particular appropriations.
I wanted to follow up on another taxation question, since you all just mentioned tourism, and we might be able to keep this one a little bit shorter answer-wise, because I know you're both familiar with it. Do either of you support diversifying the number of things that hotel taxes, TDT taxes can be spent on, and if so, on what local projects? And Representative Thompson, we'll start with you.
Well, I did take a vote when I was in the Senate years ago, and this was exclusively for the Panhandle to allow tourism development tax dollars to be used for roads and other things that tourists use as well. I think now, given that we have to be focused on the tourism industry here in Orange County, that we need to make sure those dollars are dedicated to advertising, to marketing, to the upkeep of the convention center, and to use them for that. I did lobby for getting dollars for arts and culture, and we have seen that area grow because that attracts tourism. But I think we need to make sure that we put the dollars where they were designed to be put at this particular point, and that would be in the hospitality area and marketing.
Okay, thank you. Representative Brown?
And I, again, yes, expanding it at this particular time, I would say no. Again, we've seen, same thing of raiding other trust funds, the Tadowski Fund. We have to be able to utilize those dollars. And what we've seen is it's been a benefit for the lack of expansion with those TDT dollars on us being able to use that to promote folks to come back to Florida, that Florida is safe, that, you know, we have hotels and things that are, you know, we are open. And that was a benefit. We didn't foresee, you know, these things happening within our community, but, you know, just being grateful that we've been able to do that. And again, in order to get back to where we are, I think it's important that we utilize those dollars specifically for what they're made for.
Thank you very much.
I wanted to ask about housing. Obviously, you're both aware that in Orange County recently declared a housing crisis. Where do you think the legislature should be directing its efforts first in housing? And there's emergency relief, constructing supply. Just where would you go first? And let's start with Representative Brown.
Well, I think the legislature should be focusing on providing incentives to get folks to actually want to do, you know, housing projects that, more importantly, are attainable. If you look around, you know, District 45, there's tons of housing that's going up, but it's not affordable. It's not attainable. And I think it's important that we provide those incentives to those developers to do that. I think it's also, we have to look at other innovative ways to bring in, you know, to bring in housing. I know Representative Escamani sort of recently, you know, put in to our building codes, you know, options for tiny homes, you know, or modular homes. We've seen what other cities and states have been able to do, you know, even in other countries, been able to do relating to this particular crisis. And I think if we are an area that thrives on innovation and say we are here for business, we got to make sure we're able to have the supply or the things that businesses need, which for one in particular are housing, and housing that's affordable, and you know, where everyone will be able to have, you know, options to various things as well. You know, when you look at transportation infrastructure, I think that's also goes hand in hand. You know, a person not only wants a home, but they want access to work, to play, to you know, to schools. And I think that is the focus we have to do, and more in a collaborative way with governments, but also public-private partnerships.
Thank you so much. Representative Thompson?
Thank you. I have some ideas about what I think we should be doing. One is limiting the number of properties in any one given neighborhood that can be purchased by equity firms. We have equity firms many times associated and connected with Wall Street that are coming into low-income communities and purchasing those properties. Many times they offer cash. The people who live in those homes right now have owned them for generations, but they have no cash. So they see it as a bonanza, and they sell the homes for cash, but then the rents are escalated to the point where they can't afford to live in those communities. So just as we're proposing on the federal level, limiting the number of properties that can be purchased by China, we should be looking at limiting the number of properties that can be purchased by equity firms in particular communities. We can also look at retrofitting strip malls that are now deserted and making those available for affordable housing. And yes, we certainly do need to offer incentives for developers to make it attractive for them to come into the affordable housing market. And we absolutely have to protect the Sadowski Fund and to make sure that those funds are used for the purpose for which they were intended, using those documentary stamps and then having that come back to communities for affordable housing.
I just wanted to sneak in a quick question. I know Representative Brown had mentioned transportation, and we hadn't really gotten to cover that very well. I wondered, on a local level, we've had Mayor Demings, who has proposed a penny sales tax to be used for transportation. But on a state level, looking at the district and looking at things that you can do from the legislative level, how do you support? How do you envision transportation dollars being spent? Is it roads? Is it public transportation? Is it links? How does what are the priorities for that for you? And we'll start with Representative Thompson.
Thank you. We have put a lot of money into widening our roadways, and we have what we now call the ultimate I-4. I think we need to be looking at mass transit, which has to include rail. When I have visited other cities that are comparable to Orlando, they have rail and they have connectivity. We also need to look at intermodal transportation so that once you get to your destination on, let's say, a train, that you have a means of getting to your final destination, which could be a scooter, it could be a bicycle, it could be a pedestrian trail. So we need to be looking at all of those things, but we cannot build our way out of this problem because we have to accommodate not only the residents, but also the tourists to the Senate District 15 and Orange County. And so ultimately, I think we need to be looking at mass transit and rail similar to MARTA in Atlanta, similar to the Metro in Washington, D.C., so many cities that are comparable. And those are the kinds of things that I think we need to be looking at in terms of transportation.
Thank you. Representative Brown.
And yeah, I 100% agree. I think it's time for us to update our transportation system. While buses and taxis and Ubers are great, I think it's important that we focus on rail. Rail is the future. But I think also we have to look at, the directions that many of them are going. We have seen sort of failed projects, such as the Sunrail, there are not many users with that particular project. And so I think if there are studies to kind of refocus, which areas and places we need to invest in. Autonomous vehicles are, things we definitely have to look into and put in certain pieces of legislation to make sure that they are safe on our roadways. But definitely our mass transit system is the way to go and what we all need here within the Central Florida area.
Thank you so much. We have so much more we need to cover, but we actually are at the time that we've allotted. So what I'd like to do is ask you both to make a closing statement, and then we'll wrap it up. Representative Brown, let's start with you.
Thank you. Again, thank you for the opportunity to be here. And, I've spent my time in the legislature serving others and definitely advocating for solutions for the issues in our community. I have been effective in my 6 years, have worked within this community. I am the only resident in this race that actually lives in this community. And I'm looking to continue to serve it. I've done a great job, I would say, with making sure I am in this community and folks throughout House District 45 see me, get to know me, but also accessible to this community. I have built relationships in Tallahassee that has shown in my record that I am very effective. It's time for new leadership. The legislature has changed. And so it's important that we, bring in leaders that know how to navigate through this new legislative process, but also am able to be effective at the same time. And so, I would ask for this particular community, a community that I call my village, being a product of this community, I would ask for their vote during this election cycle, this primary election cycle.
Thank you so much. And Representative Thompson.
Thank you. I believe that in my time in the legislature, my work has been evident with regard to making sure that this community has a voice in Tallahassee and being willing to step up and to be present and to do the job. And I have shown most recently in 2020 when the community wanted to honor July Perry, who was lynched in 1920. They wanted to honor him 100 years after his death and approached Representative Brown, who represents Ocoee. She declined to work with the community on this project. They came to me and I worked with them, got the road designated, had a ceremony to unveil the markers. Over 200 people attended that event. However, the representative for Ocoee was not there. So I'm willing to stand up, take on the challenges. I believe in the Constitution, even if that means challenging the governor when he oversteps his authority in terms of appointing people to the court. So taking on the challenges is what's needed, and having the leadership and having the courage, even when things are controversial or uncomfortable. Those are things that I have done in this community that people have seen, and I live in Senate District 15.
Krys, I think it's important that when things are spoken untrue, I think it's important to give others the opportunity to address those. Me knowing, again, just showing again my work ethic and me being a team player, I did not decline. I asked, me knowing Senator Thompson, who served this community for a while, but mainly dealing specifically with historic issues. Me knowing that that is her passion, I asked them to call her. If she's unable to do it, because, hey, that maybe it's me being providing a kind gesture.
Yeah, I understand.
Secondly, I had a baby during the pandemic. And so my baby was a little kid or a couple months old, and being in a pandemic, I was unfortunately not attending the event, but she was not there also because she had COVID. So I think it's very important to not assume certain things, but it's important that we continue to speak truth versus lies and nastiness in this race. Let's run on our record versus, again, trying to taint someone's integrity, but also the work we've done.
Thank you very much.
This is the race for Senate District 15. It is a highly unusual situation in which Republicans will be voting, and the winner of this race will be the new senator. The district is a good hunk of Orlando, west of I-4, and includes parts of Ocoee, Apopka, Winter Garden, and Zellwood. And as I said, the winner will be the new senator. So I thank you both very much. And I look forward to seeing how the race turns out. I wish you both the best of luck. Thank you.